Hi everyone, welcome back to Crafting at Whimsy Wonderland. My name is Stacy. You're here for another installment of my 2021 Dollar Tree calendar series. And I'm going to be using on this project the farmer's market calendar that is so popular and so hard to find for some of you. For those of you who are lucky enough to find it, let's go ahead and do this. So this is actually the cover. And on the back side of the cover, it has the pumpkin patch. And I have this sign from clearance at Hobby Lobby. It was $1.60. It's one of those wooden frame signs. It has these fun little cutouts, which are hard to see. These fun little cutouts on the edge. Okay, I thought those were kind of fun. And it's not quite big enough for this sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut with my paper trimmer so that I get it straight. I can mark it and cut with a scissors, I suppose. What I'm doing is kind of creasing where the cut needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and cut it with a scissors. Not everybody has a paper trimmer, so just do your best and cut it nice and straight. I'm going to go ahead and fold that down nice and solid so I have a really good line to cut on. Okay, so that's made a nice little wrinkle line there that I can cut neatly on. And I'm hoping that I can put the pick your own up the side. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the artist of this calendar for making these wonderful farmhouse style prints that we all love so much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is trim off the edges here, and I'm going to put pick your own down the side. Okay, so I'm going to get this straight on my sign. Then I'm going to put this straight on my sign. And then I'm going to use the calendar piece as my straight edge. And make a line. Now, because this is the cover, it's a little bit heavier than the calendar pages are. There's been a lot of people commenting on how thin the pages are and how hard they are to Mod Podge because they are so thin. I've been doing some projects, and yes, they are thin, but nothing you can't work through. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I need to get this smooth. It's very rough. It's like almost like something got splattered on it. So I'm going to take off this price tag. All right, so I'm going to take a quick sandpaper to this just to get that roughness off. Now, I don't want these words to bleed through my paper, so I'm going to get a little bit of white paint. This is just Waverly chalk paint in white. And I'm not going to paint the whole surface. I am just going to cover up these words. It'll take a couple of coats. This has dried completely, so now I'm going to pour on a little Mod Podge because my Mod Podge is getting very low and it's hard to dip all the way to the bottom of the big jug. So I'm going to put a nice coat of Mod Podge on this entire surface. A lot of people like to use foam brushes for Mod Podging. I prefer bristles. You use whatever you have better luck with. What works for you. The bristle brushes are a little harder to clean up with Mod Podge. Takes a little more time, a little soap and water, but it comes together. So I just like the look that you get in the bristles or the brush strokes when you use a bristled brush, especially on the top layers. So if you prefer foam, you go right ahead and use that. I have had bad luck with foam brushes, with the foam like peeling and flaking in the Mod Podge, and then I don't get a smooth piece. Alright, so I'm going to start with my edge piece, and I'm going to lay that down, trying to center it as best I can. And I'm just going to use my fingers, and then I'm going to crease it, and I'm going to snip it off. Yeah, I'm just going to snip it off. Crease, lift up, and snip. Alright. The reason I did this one first is because it's actually going to end up being a tiny bit underneath of the calendar page, just right on the edge. So I want to make sure that I get that. And I'm going to go ahead and put the Mod Podge over the top of this one, just so that if the calendar overlaps, it's got Mod Podge in between that and the calendar. Alright, down goes my calendar, and I am just going to line it up with the edge of the sign. Do my best to make sure that it's straight, and push it down. Now I'm getting some bubbles in this first strand, but it's still good and wet, so I'm going to use my finger to push them down. And then I get my brayer out and I roll. If you don't have a brayer, a rolling pin works good. A credit card, you can scoop anything that's going to have an edge that you can move the bubbles out of the middle of your piece. Okay. And I feel with my hands to see where sometimes you can feel a bubble better than you can see the bubble. And wherever there's a bubble, I'm going to roll it out. I roll from the middle to the edge. I'm gonna get a wrinkle there on the T. I'm pretty sure of it just because of the way it feels. Alright. Now, if you're using the thinner actual calendar page, and you're not using the cover like I'm using, you might be getting even more wrinkles than I am. And if you are, and you're getting lots and lots of wrinkles, my suggestion would be to let this completely dry before you put the Mod Podge over the top, okay? And while it's drying, you keep working at those bubbles and smushing them and moving them and thinning them out as much as you can, just with your fingers, with your credit card. Don't dig too deeply into the paper because it is thin and it will tear, but you want to get as many bubbles out as you can. But since I'm using the cover for this, of this calendar for this project, it's thicker. And so I'm going to go ahead and seal it down now. Pour on my Mod Podge, and I'm going to make sure that I get this Mod Podged here where those two pieces overlap. And then once this is dry, I can take sandpaper around the edge and get rid of any of the little bits that overhang. Okay, I have a bubble here where I didn't get enough Mod Podge, or it started to dry before I got it stuck down. That happens too. There's like this fine line between just enough Mod Podge and too much. Make sure you seal down that little hole of the calendar that that they use for hanging. And what I like about this sign is it's wide enough and flat enough on the bottom. Oops, see, I'm getting a big bubble right there. It's wide enough and flat enough that it's just a shelf sitter. I don't have to hang it. It can just sit up there on my shelf and look cute. I rearranged furniture in my living room, and I ended up using all of the pieces that I decorated above my kitchen cabinets with in my living room this year for fall decor. So now I need to make some more that can go up on my cupboards, and that's where this one's going to go. I got too much Mod Podge, so I'm simply just scooping it up and wiping it back into the jar. Alright, now that I've got a good coat, I'm going to go back and forth so that all of my brush strokes go the same direction. And I am getting some serious bubbles here. Going to have to embrace the bubbles. I don't think that these projects with these calendars are going to be perfectly smooth because of how thin they are, because of what kind of paper they are. So what I'm going to do now that I have this down and I have my brush strokes all laid off in the same direction, I'm going to take the heat gun to this and dry the surface enough to where I can touch it and work some of those bubbles out. I hold my heat gun away from my piece, because if you get it too close and you stay in one place too long, your Mod Podge will blister, and you don't want that. So I'm basically just warming up the air around it. You can see all the wrinkles that are along the top. I'll get those smoothed down for sure, but I don't know about this one right here. There's a pretty big one there. And you can tell when the Mod Podge stops being cloudy, that's when you're at the point where you can touch it and not stick. But if it's white at all, leave it alone. I'm using my paintbrush to smooth this one out. I've got the surface of it dry. There's a few wet spots I need to be careful of. Let me see if you can catch. See all those wrinkles? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best, because underneath the Mod Podge is probably still a little bit wet. And so I'm going to do what I can to move those wrinkles along. I'm not going to get them completely out. Once they're there, they're kind of there, but you can reduce them a little bit. Okay, look at that one. You can't see it as much. It's still there. I can still see it, but it's not like it was. Okay. Now, I'm going to really roll out these bubbles on top. And I've really got a big bubble right here. Let's see if we can move it along a little. If you can get it to where it's lots of tiny little bubbles, it does not show as much as one big blistery bubble will. So if you can move it along and make that bubble smaller in any way, do it. But just know that it will have some wrinkles on it, and you're just going to have to be okay with that. Pardon my phone, I forgot to turn it on silent. Okay. Alright, now these are drier, so I'm gonna go ahead and work on that. You hear it kind of crinkling. That's because the Mod Podge is drying. So, but it's still wet enough underneath that once you smush that bubble, it'll release a little bit of wet and suck it back down. Okay. All right, let me show you. Let's see if I can catch the light with it. Look at the top. Remember all the bubbles that were there? There's a couple still there, but not like it was. And that big bubble that was over here, it's pretty smooth. This is my spot I'm worried about the most, where I had to peel it up and put some more Mod Podge underneath. It's feeling a little weak. There are some small bubbles up here, and there's one here. So I'm just gonna kind of try to flatten it down with my fingers as best I can. Okay, embrace the wrinkles. Once it's all completely dry and we distress it, it's gonna look great. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to let this dry for an hour or so to make sure that what's underneath of it is dry, but I'm liking how this can just sit up on its own. That's the whole plan. Sorry, there we go again. Okay. I'm liking how this can sit up all by itself. That was kind of the plan, is to have some freestanding signs that don't need wall space, that can just sit and look cute. Okay? Alright, I'll be back in a little bit after this dries completely. Alright, the pumpkin patch Mod Podge has all dried, so I'm going to take my sandpaper, because I've got a little bit where it's hanging over right here on the end, and I'm just going to sand that off so that it's nice and smooth. I want to do just the tiniest bit of distressing to this. So I've got my black, and this is going to be an extremely dry brush. I'm just using the paint that's in my lid, and I'm just barely. And I'm just going to come up off the edges just the tiniest little bit, just to give it some aged look around the edges and to help blend in. You can always go back and add more, but you can't go back and take it away. I like to draw the brush from the edge in towards the center, so I turn my piece as I go so that I'm at the right angle for that. To switch to antique wax, and I have the tiny, these are all from Waverly, by the way. If I forget to show you, they're all from Waverly. Just a little in the lid, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm using the same brush, still has the black on it, and I'm going to now pull in a little bit of brown, and that brown is going to be mixed in with the black, so it's going to blend nicely. Just use a very light touch, a light hand when you're doing this. I'm going to kind of put a little smudgy bit down here, because you can tell there's a seam there, and you can tell it's like another piece of wood that's going down the side. So I'm going to embrace that and not try to hide it, but make it stand out as intentional. When you put the brown over black, I think it adds another layer of depth, that whenever you want something to look old and weathered, you've got to take the time to add layers. Okay, this is the part I'm a little bit nervous about. I'm going to go along these shiplap lines because I want them to stand out. I've got a very dry brush, and I'm not putting a lot on. I just want the lines to pop out a little bit. I always get nervous when I put something across the middle of the art that I already like, but I think that it just needs it to add that little bit of depth. I'm not pushing hard, I'm just letting the dry brush do the work. Okay, there's not a big difference there, just a little tiny bit, and sometimes you don't need a big difference, you just need a subtlety, and this way it brings the weather look onto the rest of the wood pieces. Because you're wood is going to weather at the edges the most. And that's where you want to show that weather. Okay, now I'm going to show you. It's not a big difference, it's just a little bit. But here's what it was before, and there's what it is now. See that little extra bit of weathering across the pumpkins, and like right here, that just makes it age a little bit more, and I've darkened up the edges. Okay, like I said, this is the back of the cover on the inside. So anyway, I'm going to kind of put a little bit of darkness over where that hole is, just to kind of blend it in a little bit. I just want that to kind of disappear. Okay, and once you're happy with it, just stop. Okay, now I would recommend sealing this with a clear coat of sealer, or you could do another coat of Mod Podge, but I think I'll take it out and spray a clear coat on it just to protect it, so that when I store them away it doesn't get all sticky. Alright, there you have it, my pumpkin patch sign decoupaged on from the Farmer's Market calendar from the Dollar Tree. Let me know what you're thinking about this project in the comment section below. Let me know if you've been able to find this calendar or any of the calendars, and if so, which one's your favorite and which one do you have? Would you like to see more projects from? So let me know what you have available to you, and I will do my best to make some more projects to show you how to use up that particular calendar. Alright, leave a comment in the comment section below. If you like this project, give it a thumbs up. That helps my channel to grow. And I will see you on the next installment. Alright, this has been Crafting at Whimsy Wonderland. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.